Good afternoon.
Welcome to Ham Radio today. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. My name is John, call signs N4AJR, previously KG4SUO. I've been licensed as a ham now since 2002. So a long time in radio. Today I'm going to talk about some real basic stuff with the Baofeng UV-5R radio. Just going to go through some real basic stuff aimed at the total beginner, really. I've got some friends who have picked one up, looking to get their license, looking to get radio knowledge and whatnot, and they knew how to turn it on, and that was about it. So this is really aimed at the beginner, the real beginner. Hopefully we'll cover things in depth without getting too technical. I don't want to get too overly technical. We'll go through some basic, just a basic description of everything. I'm going to cover some accessories that I recommend that you get when you get the radio. We'll go through some variations of it and things to look for. We'll cover some programming. I'm going to actually have a part 2 of this video that will cover the chirp software, which is what I recommend you use when you program the radio. We'll go through one on the keypad, and by the time we get to the end of it, you'll see why it will drive you to drink and you'll never want to do it again. It's real. The menu system's just not very intuitive. We'll go through some usage basics. Basic stuff. Like I said, if you're already a seasoned ham, or if you already know how to use the radio, this may not be the video for you. Of course, you know, feel free to stick around. I'm always open for suggestions or tips or anything that might improve or make the videos better. We're going to dive over to the other view here, and we're going to start talking about the radio. So this is the UV-5R. It is a Chinese-made radio. I know nowadays that is important to some people. They're inexpensive. You do get what you pay for, but at the same time, it is a really good value. It's good for its intended purpose. Right now, as far as I know, online you can find them for anywhere between $25 and some variations of it. I've seen upwards of $70 or $80, but it's a simple analog dual band amateur radio. It does have, however, capabilities in FRS, GMRS, and MERS, transmit and receive capabilities. I will say a little caveat here, or disclaimer, that I do not recommend or suggest anyone use this without proper licensing, especially for GMRS and even with FRS. There's some gray area. I don't want to get too technical with it, with what the radio is technically approved for and not approved for. Just a general disclaimer that I don't recommend anyone use this in any way that it is not designed for, or in any way that you are not licensed for, and so on. However, that being said, it will transmit and operate on the FRS frequencies. FRS, by the way, Family Radio Service. Those are your little blister pack radios that you can find at Walmart and other big box retailers. Typically a fixed antenna. You can't program them. They're pre-programmed with the channels. It's all set, and you just take it out, put batteries in, and operate. This will talk on those frequencies. GMRS, General Mobile Radio Service. It will operate on that as well. License from the FCC for that, I believe, is $70 to $80. Lasts for 10 years. It's good for, if one person got it, it's good for an entire family. It is a shared service. There are other entities, businesses, and whatnot that will use GMRS. So you could run into conflict, interference, and whatnot with that. Disclaimer again, don't use it on those without proper licensing. Although These radios are kind of targeted at your preppers, your emergency communications, in which case, in a life or death emergency, obviously use the radio to call out for help on whatever means you can get out on. And then MERS is multi-use radio service. I don't really recommend going into that one and utilizing that too much. You could run into a lot of different services using that as well. Very limited frequency options and so on. So wouldn't recommend it, but it is capable. You can at least listen on all of it. But like I said, it's dual band. So from an amateur point of view, it's a VHF, UHF, or 2 meter, 70 centimeter radio. Got 2 power settings, got a high power and a low power. It says it's rated at 5 watts and 1 watt. Various tests will show anything from 3 to 4 watts and around 1 watt. You may get the full 5. I've actually seen some go slightly over the 5 watts. So mileage will vary, obviously, with that. It does your typical analog FM. It's also capable of the narrow FM, more for the FRS and the GMRS. You can do crossband receive and transmit. It does have dual VFOs, which we'll go over here in just a moment. Only 128 total memory channels, which, in my opinion, that's a little bit on the low side. Most of my other HTs, amateur HTs, they number up into the thousands. So that's a little low. So you have to be picky and choosy if you're really big on storing a lot of stuff in memory. Accessories wise, before we dive into the usage of the radio, this is actually using the larger battery, the extended battery, which, if there's anything you're going to get, I recommend the extended battery and a new antenna. This just has a stock rubber ducky, translate dummy load antenna on it. If there's one thing for sure that I recommend you change the antenna. If you're going to go for a 2 antenna and get the bigger battery, this extended battery lasts a very long time. I have yet to push it, but I have had it off of a charge and run it off and on for days and days and not even knocked a dent into it. Obviously, the more you transmit, the more it's going to drain the battery. The antenna is just an SMA antenna. You want to make sure if you change your antenna, you get one with a proper connector. Antenna options, there is the Nagoya antenna that you'll see if you buy the radio from Amazon and a few other vendors. You'll see it advertised with the Nagoya antenna. Nagoya antennas are really good antennas. I personally do not have one. One thing you have to be real careful with Nagoya are counterfeit. There's ways to tell with the packaging and so on if it's a knockoff or not, but you got to be really careful. There are people who have purchased Nagoya antennas, and they have purchased them from vendors on Amazon and gotten, they've received counterfeit equipment, and a counterfeit antenna is not going to do you any good either. It's going to be a dummy load. But antenna options, Nagoya, like I said, I don't have an example here. We've also got the ABBREE antenna. Let's put it this way. Got the ABBREE antenna. These are the foldable, tactical, you know, I'm cool. It looks ridiculous. This is actually the 42.5, I think it is inches. This is the big one. They actually look ridiculous. They seem gimmicky, but surprisingly they work. It works really well on this radio. You're obviously, if you put it on, this one is for a Kenwood radio, so it's not going to screw on, but it's the same antenna. When you put it on, you wouldn't carry it around with this thing fully extended. This would be if you're wearing it on a pouch or on gear, a vest, a backpack, or whatever. You can move the Velcro and you can fold the antenna so that it folds over a shoulder, over a sleeve, something like that. The basics of this antenna, this is actually, this part here comes off, and this is your coil, the loading coil here, and then the rest of this is kind of like a whip, the foldable part. I will tell you, this antenna, depending on how you fold it, your performance is affected. I've done some field testing and such, and with one fold, 2 folds, fully extended on both VHF and UHF, and surprisingly it did affect the antenna quite a bit. But it's a good antenna, and it's very inexpensive, And it's one of those where if it gets bent or whatever, you're not out a whole lot, but it's kind of made to do that. So it's good to put on gear, like I said, vest, backpacks, or whatever. The other option would be a diamond antenna, and I have one currently on another radio, but the diamond, let's see, the SRJ77CA from Diamond. Fantastic antenna. I am a big fan of diamond antennas. Use them on just about all of my radios. But this one is, what is it? I believe it's 16, 17 inches, 15, 16 inches, something like that. It is a whip. You know, it bends and flexes, not quite like the ABBREE. Don't fold it over because you can break it. But it's a fantastic dual band antenna. It reception is great. The transmit quality is great. I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that. I've been using diamond antennas on my HTs, man, since I can remember. Now, those are just some of the options. There are others. I don't really recommend like the metal telescoping whips. They break real easily. They bend real easily. I haven't had a lot of good performance with those either. I don't recommend those. But, you know, anything really outside of the stock, and I'm not even sure if this is just one of my many. I have a drawer full of them. Anything other than the stock antenna is a good option. So with the Baofeng UV-5R, when you buy it, you'll notice a lot of people get confused when they go on to Amazon or whatever, and they'll see UV-5R, they'll see UV-5R Plus, they'll see B-Tech, they'll see, I think I've seen Mirror Kit. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. You'll see a lot of different variations that all still call themselves a UV-5R, a Baofeng UV-5R. My understanding, and I'm not familiar with all of them, my understanding with the B-Tech, at least, B-Tech is based in the United States. My understanding, like I said, correct me, of course, if I'm wrong. But I believe B-Tech, for example, is in the United States, and it's my understanding that they take the base UV-5R, the base radio, they make their own modifications, if you will. I have been told, I do not have a B-Tech radio. This is the Baofeng that I've got. But I've been told that they make some minor modifications on the internals. Supposedly, they make some upgrades front end and so on, and then they put their B-Tech on it, and it's a B-Tech UV-5R. Sometimes it'll cost a little bit more. I know the Mirror Kit one I've seen, I've no experience with it, but I've seen it say it goes to, I think it goes either 6, 7, 8 watts or something like that. You'll find a lot of variations. You have to just be careful with who you get, who you purchase it from, and what you get. A lot of counterfeit stuff flying around out there. A lot of false claims where someone will slap their own sticker on it and claim they did this, they did that, and they improved this or whatever. And you get a UV-5R that you just paid too much for. So just, you know, something to be aware of. Like I said, programming this, which we'll cover briefly, from the keypad is a nightmare. I recommend when you buy the radio, this would be the third accessory that I would highly recommend you get is the programming cable. When you buy it, you want to buy the programming cable that was made for the UV-5R. You don't want to grab just any old cable. It won't work. You'll get errors. You'll get comm errors. It will not communicate with the radio. You want to make sure you get an authentic cable that is designed to work with the radio. I have one around here somewhere. It's just a USB cable, but it's got a chip in it. And if that chip is counterfeit or is something that's not supposed to be used with this, you'll run into problems. For programming, the Chirp software, that's what is recommended. That's what I use. There will be a part 2 to this video where I will cover Chirp, how you use it, how you communicate with the radio, how to program the radio and everything. And you'll see from this one, you'll see with the Chirp software, so much easier. So I highly recommend programming with the Chirp software versus the keypad, just so that you can, you know, save some frustrations and so on. But if you want to do it with the keypad, it is possible. It's just a little more time consuming and a lot less intuitive. So the basics of the radio on here, you've got, you know, your antenna, your on off button, which we'll go ahead and fire it on. I have mine set to show my call sign, which that can be programmed. We'll cover all that later. Your VFO MR button, that's your VFO. This has two VFOs, as you can see, the top, the frequency there, and then I have the bottom one showing the name of the memory channel. Right now it's on the 70 centimeter calling frequency. VFO and MR will take you between the VFO mode, frequency mode as she calls it, and the channel mode. I don't know if you can actually hear that or not. VFO is where you can type in just type in a frequency and you can set the settings. That's also how you're going to do programming from the keypad. Memory is going to go through everything that you've stored in memory. Pretty self-explanatory. You've got on here on the side, you've got your push to talk button. You push that to talk, pretty self-explanatory. You've got a call button on the side here. When you push the call button, right there, it'll take you to FM radio. Hopefully you can see that. So you can listen to FM stations. If you hit scan, it will go until it hits a loud FM radio, and then you can listen there. You know, something good in an emergency if you want to hear maybe what's going on out there. That's the way to do it. You hit call again, it'll go back to there. If you hold call, it will turn on an alarm feature. So I don't know if you can. So it makes that sound, it flashes the light, and yes, it does have a flashlight. This little thing flashes, and it just makes a lot of noise. You push the call button again, and it will turn that off. So it's a neat little feature. You've got a monitor button right here. Monitor, when you hold it down, monitor opens the squelch. So if there's a weak signal, maybe down in the noise, you hold that down, and you might be able to hear it coming through. If you push the monitor, quick push, you just turn on the flashlight. So there's a difference. You can make it flash, and then you hit it again and it'll turn it off. Long pushing has a function, and a short push has a function on most of these buttons. Like I said, VFO and MR, that is going to change you between frequency mode and memory mode. The A and B button is going to move you between your A VFO and your B VFO. You can't really see it, I don't think. Well, you can kind of right there. That little arrow. You see the arrow move to the bottom. Now I'm on the bottom VFO. And now I'm back on the top VFO. Okay, so the band right here, band button, when you're in frequency mode, band will change the band you're on. See, it's going between 2 meters, 70 centimeters. With the programming software, it's easier. You can set the limits, the band limits, and you can adjust some things there. But this is how you would change if you wanted to. When you're in frequency mode, you can just type in your frequency and it's going to change automatically. But that allows you to change between the two. If you were going to run a just a frequency range scan and you want to scan, you know, 400s, you'd change the band on one and so on. Obviously, with your keypad down here, you've got your menu button. Menu is going to take you into menu mode. If you hit menu again, that drops you down into the menu option. You can see right here, I'm in the squelch, SQL, the squelch menu option. And now I'm down on the bottom. It will time out if you let it sit there, as you saw there. And it will drop you back out. But from here, and then the up and down arrows will allow me to change that value. I keep my squelch on this set to 2. I find that works good for me. Exit to drop back out, or you can just let it sit and it'll drop out. I like it being on squelch too. If you're in an area where you're getting a lot of interference or a lot of intermod or whatever, if you're getting stuff kind of jumping in, you can raise your squelch up a little bit and see if you can't work that back out. But I keep it to where it's just above where it would be a constant hiss, if you will. It's just what works for me. On the side over here, real quick, before I forget this is where the programming cable is going to plug in. You can see it's a specific type of cable. It does have a head with 2 prongs on it. This is also where, if you got an external speaker mic, or if you choose to use the earpiece that comes with it. The earpiece it comes with is kind of crap, I'll be honest. It's not something you're going to get a lot of mileage out of. There are aftermarket ones you can get that work really well with this. And then on the extended battery, this right here allows you to get a USB type of charger that will plug in back here, so you don't have to plug into the big base that comes with it. All right, back on the keyboard or keypad, the up and down arrow when you are in channel mode, the up and down arrow is going to change your channels. So you can see this is stuff that was already programmed in here. On here, if you right here, you can't really see it. The text is really small, but the star key, that's your scan key. If you hit scan, it will start to scan on the memory like that. See, it's scanning. And then when it hits a signal, this one I actually, in my area, this particular repeater, you get some interference. There's stuff in the neighborhood here. And then you can hit it again to stop. You can hit exit to stop. That's what the scan button here does. All of these have got functions and such. Like I said, I don't recommend trying to go the hard way through the keypad on here. It's very, how would I say it? It's very unintuitive. I recommend doing most of your programming. You can see I got a lot of stuff in here. I recommend doing most of your programming through Chirp. You will, you'll thank me for that later. It's really just not, it's not worth it trying it on the keypad, but we're going to do that. On the back, of course, you can put the belt clip on, and then up top right here, that's how you really remove the battery. It does have a little strap here. I don't use those straps. They drive me crazy. Those are most of your, it's just the basics of the buttons. Like I said, aimed at real beginners who aren't sure what AB means, what band means, and so on. This radio is also Vox capable. Vox is voice activated, if you will. I don't really recommend using Vox because it's going to pick up anything and everything when you talk. I'm a bigger advocate of push to talk. I recommend using push to talk, but it is capable of doing Vox if you so choose. This radio does have, when we get to the programming part, if you're going to program or utilize repeaters, amateur radio repeaters, which anybody who's going to use it for amateur radio use, you're going to use a repeater eventually. It does have all the CTCSS capability for tone activated repeaters and whatnot. That's all in here. All set. You can set through the menu. For this, also a setting I recommend that I personally keep off on all my radios. I turn off battery savers. Some people will run them. I find that it's more of an interference and it might shut things off or it might conserve things when I don't want it to. I just prefer, it's a personal preference of mine that I keep battery savers turned off. Like I said, this is capable of doing a dual watch. It's menu option 7 if you go through the hard menus. And it will allow you, between the two VFOs, it will periodically check the other VFO for a signal. If it gets a signal, it'll sit there and let you hear it. It'll kind of switch to that for a second and then go back to normal operation. This does have, like I showed you, the ability to scan memory settings and or channels, and it also goes through frequency ranges. So if you wanted to search from 144 to 148, it will scan every frequency through that range. It has settings for the scan. So when you're scanning, it's menu option 18, and you can set either a time operation, a carrier operation, or a search operation. The time operation on here will stop the scan when a active signal is picked up, and it will sit for a certain set time, and then it will just go back into the scan. So if you wanted it to sit there for a few seconds or whatever, and then just continue back on with what it's doing, that's what the time operation will do. Carrier operation will scan until it hits a signal or a carrier, as that could be even something interfering. It's going to pick up a carrier and it will stop the scan, and then if the signal drops out, it will automatically resume the scan. That's your carrier operation. So that's similar to a scanner, where the scanner, a normal radio scanner, will stop when there's something talking, and then when it stops talking, or whatever it was that was giving a signal or a carrier, when that stops, it'll just resume right back into the scan. And then it's got a search operation, or SE, which will scan and stop on a channel with an active signal, and then that stops the scan. It'll just sit there. And then that gives you time to you know, take note of the frequency or listen, or if you want to program it in, if you're looking for stuff or whatever. Like I said, in the menus, and I don't know if you can, hopefully you can see this. When you're sitting up in the top in the menu, you can use the arrow keys to go through each and every menu option. There are a total of, I believe it's 40 different menu options or menu possibilities. You can pretty much set just about anything in here through your menus. Like I said, Chirp is a much easier way to do this. All of these options are in the Chirp software, and it's more point and click, checking boxes, selecting things, much more intuitive, lot easier way to do it. Highly recommend doing it that way. So this is capable, as you can see here. Let me find a repeater. So right here, that's a memory channel for a repeater, so you can kind of see, and we'll switch over and show the LCD screen, but you can see some extra stuff on here, the plus, the minus, the R, whole bunch of other things. That's programmed for a repeater. So for those that are brand new or don't know, when you use a ham repeater, you're going to transmit on one frequency and you're going to listen on another. The frequencies, it's got what's called an offset, and that's by design. That's just how they are set up to function. If you're working on your license or just got your license, you'll learn more about that as you go. But when you program these things, you're going to have, on this one, you have to program the transmit frequency. You have to program the receive frequency. You have to tell it the offset. You have to tell it the offset. You have to tell it how much the shift is, which we'll cover that in a minute. You basically have to give it every single detail. Same thing in Chirp, although in Chirp, you're just typing it in into kind of a menu sort of system, whereas in here, it's much more difficult. So when you're programming a repeater, you have to tell it, and there's a website that I use for repeater information. If you use Chirp, you can actually query this website to pull the data in, populate it into Chirp for you. But if you want to do it by hand, there's a good website, and we can add links, I believe, down into the description of this, repeaterbook.com. And when we're done, maybe we'll pull a couple of these up. But Repeater Book is where I get most of my repeater information. It seems to stay fairly well updated. It does include your analog repeaters and your digital, DMR, some D-Star, the System Fusion from Yaesu, and everything else. So all of this information you can get from Repeater Book for programming into here. But when you're programming a repeater, you're going to have to tell it if it's a plus or a minus shift. And then you're going to have to tell it if it's how much that shift is, how much shift the value in megahertz. For VHF, it's 0.60000, but 0.6 megahertz, and UHF is 5 megahertz. That's how it's set. You can find, on occasion, you might find a repeater that has a weird special offset. If it does, when you look that repeater up, it'll give you all that information. That's your standard shifts, is VHF 0.6, UHF is 5. So you have to plug all this stuff in when you're programming in a repeater from the keypad. You plug it all in Chirp. Like I said, it's more of a menu system. It just makes a lot more sense. All right, so from here, if we want to program in a repeater, and I'm just going to make some stuff up, we're going to go with, put it in VFO mode. Now, if you're using the dual watch or any of that, you got to disable all of that, which I'm not using. But if you have TDR running, you do menu. So when I go through this, you do menu, right? And then you can hit 7 and it'll take you to that. See how TDR is on? And then I hit menu again, it drops me down into the actual value. I can turn that off. And then I hit menu again, takes me back up, and I hit exit. And that turns that feature on or off. Okay, so if we're going to program, continuing with programming from the keypad here, which once again, I don't recommend doing. After you've gone into VFO mode, make sure TDR is turned off, which we just did. You're going to want to go to whatever memory channel that you're going to program, assuming you're starting from the beginning. That could be 000 or 001. The menu options for this are from 000 to 127. When I program in Chirp, I tend to skip the 000 and start at 1 and just program up from there. So you're going to pick the memory channel that you're going to utilize. On this one, I believe, I think 98 is where I have nothing actually put in. So you're going to want to clear that memory channel. So you hit menu, and then you type in 28. See how that goes to delete channel? Then you hit menu again, and that drops you down. Then I would type in 98, and then I hit menu, and it deletes it. Then I hit exit. So now channel 98 is deleted. So if I go to here and I go to, where am I? I'm at 9, I think. So if we just back all the way through, see how it goes and stops at 97. So we're going to try to program 98. So we need to set the repeater offset. So we're going to do menu. We're going to type in 26 right here. We're going to hit menu again. And then we're going to type 0, 0, 0, 6, 0, 0. So we're going to do a 0.6 offset. Then we hit menu. And then we hit exit. So now that offset is set. Now we have to set the frequency shift for a plus or minus. This particular repeater we're putting in as a plus. So we're going to go menu. We're going to go 25. We're going to go menu again. And then we are going to use the up and down arrows. See the minus, then the plus. This is a plus, so we're going to do that. Hit menu again. Hit exit. Now you see, I don't know if you can see it, the little plus right up above the frequency there. So we've got our offset. Or the shift, I guess you could call it. Now we got to put CTCSS, the Continuous Tone Coded Squelch System. Basically, think of it this way. A CTSS is like a code to key up the repeater. So something transmitting on the frequency that the repeater is listening on, if you don't have the tone on it, it won't key the repeater. Anybody who is within range of you simplex could hear you, but the repeater won't broadcast out what you're saying. You put the tone in, that's how you access the repeater. So for this, we're going to menu. Going to menu option 13 for CTCSS. We're going to hit menu again. And now you'll see, you can kind of see the frequencies here. There's a whole bunch of them in there to choose from. So you got to pick up what tone the particular repeater you're programming in is going to use. This particular one here uses 107. So we're going to go down to 107. Right there, 107.2. These are predefined, so you just have to select the one. We're going to hit menu again. It's going to save that setting right there. So once the CTCSS is set, if you need it, now if it doesn't need it, you can skip that step. And if you're programming simplex, obviously you'd skip several steps. Right now we're going through the repeater because it's the most involved. But like I said, if the repeater does not have a tone, which some do not, then you just skip that CTCSS completely. You just turn it off if it was already on. So once that's set, we have to enter the repeater's output frequency. So for this, we're going to do, since we're in VFO mode, we're going to do 147.240. So that's the repeater's output frequency. Once we have that set in the VFO, we're going to store what we've done so far in memory channel 98. So we're going to hit menu, we're going to type in 27. See where it says memory channel, we're going to hit menu. Then right here, we're going to type in 98. Then we're going to hit menu again. Now it's saved what we've done so far in channel 98. Then we're going to hit exit. Now we're going to go to the scan button right here. We're going to hit scan to turn on reverse mode. I don't know if you notice. See how the frequency changed? So you can see with that, when we hit scan and we turn on reverse mode, you see how the frequency changed. So now we're sitting on the uplink or the transmit frequency. All the settings are still the same though. So that same tone, the shift, all that stuff is still set. We've just changed to that frequency. So now we're going to store this one in memory on the same channel. So what we just put on 98, we're also going to store this in 98. This is why the Chirp software makes more sense, because you just type all that in and you save it. It doesn't seem like you're double saving stuff and whatnot. But anyways, this is how you do it from the keypad. So we're going to go once again. We're going to go to menu. We're going to go, we're sitting on 27, but if you weren't, you just type 27. You're going to go there. You're going to hit menu again to drop down into the actual selection. And then we're going to type 98, same one we just did. And then we're going to hit menu. And it's saved. And then we're going to hit exit. Once we've done that, we're going to go hit scan again to turn off reverse mode. You see the frequency switched back. We can hit, and you see right there on 98, you see everything we just did is stored. So it has stored, and that repeater I put in actually won't key from here, so I can do, and you see how that changes? You saw the frequency change, the screen colors and stuff change. You can set that as well so that there's a color for listening, a color for receiving, and a color for transmitting and such. But you see how that changed. It automatically shifted based on what I put in to the memory channel. It automatically shifted so that I transmit on the repeater's transmit frequency. Then it automatically goes back to the repeater's receive frequency so I can hear it. All of that right there was to program one channel with a repeater into memory. If you were going to plug in a simplex frequency, which, bear with me if you understand what simplex is. If you don't, we'll cover all that real quick. Simplex is one frequency, no shift, radio to radio. There's no repeater. So it's basically line of sight communications. With an HT, realistically, you're probably going to get, in a typical setting, obstructions, trees, houses, neighborhoods, whatever, you might get a couple of miles if you're lucky. With a decent antenna on here, you may get a few more. Less obstructions, you're going to get more distance. Theoretically, you would be able to go until you hit curvature of the earth and something gets in your way. Realistically, with HTs, think of those as more line of sight and more closer proximity. If you're on one end of town and the person you want to talk to is all the way on the other end of town, and there's a nice repeater sitting in the center of town with an antenna that's up really, really high, you're going to use the repeater to communicate with each other. So simplex is going to be line of sight, radio to radio, using the same frequency. You don't have to put tones on it. There's no shifts or any of that. What the repeater does, as I just said, the repeater would be the middleman between two people over greater distance. When you look up repeaters on Repeater Book, a lot of them will give you the footprint or the area of coverage of that particular repeater. So as long as you're within that balloon, typically you'll be able to raise it and you'll be able to hear it. Now, you may be able to hear a repeater really well, and from the HT with the few watts it's putting out, even with a better antenna, if you've got a lot of distance from you to that repeater, pitch, it may be hard. Chances are going to be you may not be able to raise it at all. If you do, it might be a very, very noisy signal. HTs are going to be limited, just, you know, with the power output, with obstructions and so on. If you're going to try to get to far off repeaters, typically you're going to want a little bit bigger antenna, maybe a mobile or a base station, and you're going to be putting out more like, you know, anywhere 10 up to 50, 60 watts, whatever. But that's basically what simplex is versus a repeater. Simplex is going to be radio to radio, line of sight. Obstructions will greatly reduce that. So the more junk you've got between you and who you're talking to, the less distance you're going to get out of your signal. And then, of course, the radio system, the antenna system, and a whole host of factors come into play with that. But that's the basic idea behind that. For part one, that is a very basic overview of the Baofeng UV-5R. Some basic functions, things you can do from the keypad, like programming. That's a big one I get asked a lot. And then when people see what's involved, they realize the value of using chirp. One more thing on the keypad, I totally forgot. It does have a lock button on it, so you can lock the keypad. That way, if you're going to carry it in a pouch, you can set yourself. If you and a friend or whatever were using a simplex frequency and you don't want things to get bumped in the pouch and change, you can lock the keypad so it will keep things from changing. The rest of these, like I said, there's a lot of functions in there, but if you're not well versed in what you're doing, you can get things messed up and get kind of lost in it to where it can be hard to back yourself back out without resetting. I had a buddy that managed to set his to where it started speaking Chinese and was doing some other stuff, and it took him a bit to finally get himself back to neutral where he could use it again. And then, you know, when I programmed it, I fixed all that. But that's a basic overview of how you do basic things on the keypad, what the buttons mean, what some of the simple functions are. There's going to be a part two and potentially more parts after that. To follow up on this, part two, I'm going to cover the Chirp software, how to program it through Chirp, uploading to the radio, and all the settings and everything you can do inside of Chirp. And then for a part three to this video, we'll do some usage, some field type testing to show basic usage and to show kind of how you would go about using this, at least on the ham frequencies. Like I said, I'm licensed, so I can operate on all of that. As far as I stated in the beginning, as far as FRS and GMRS, I don't advocate for or recommend that you use them without proper licensing and whatnot. If you choose to do so, of course, that's on your own accord of your own free will, which is perfectly fine. And in an emergency situation, like I said, licensing and stuff, if it's life or death, things have really gotten bad, licensing kind of goes out the window, and do what you got to do to get a signal out. Programming GMRS into this, programming FRS into this, and everything else, the gist is going to be the same. You're going to plug your frequencies in. You may, for GMRS and FRS, you'll have to set for narrow FM versus just regular FM, if there's any other kinds of tones or whatever. GMRS does have a small subset of frequencies that are used for repeaters. There are GMRS repeaters out there. They're just not as heavily used. There's not as many of them. You will find some places where GMRS does get some usage, and then some places where nobody touches it. I don't really go into that here. I personally don't use it. I did have a GMRS license at one point, way back before I got my ham license, and I have not done anything with it since. I find ham radio to be a lot more enjoyable. There's so much you can do with it, especially if you move beyond your technician license. It opens up a lot of doors, which future videos on this channel, you know, obviously we're going to go through a lot of that stuff. We're going to have some fun. All right, so figured I would bring this up real quick and show you. This is Repeater Book. It's the one I use for looking up repeater information. It's very simple. When you go to repeaterbook.com, it's going to bring you to this page. You can do specialized searches and such from here. All right, so on repeater book, you can do specialized searches up here, or you just scroll down. North American repeaters here, worldwide if you're here, and this does have a GMRS repeater database. And then of course you can do narrowed down searches, but go to North America and it's going to bring up a map right here. This is clickable. So we're out here in Virginia, so I would click Virginia, or I could scroll down and click it down there. And then from here you can narrow down your search unless you want to see everything. You can also go in if you were one, which you probably wouldn't be looking at basic stuff here if you were, but if you wanted to add repeaters or whatever, you can do that through here. But you can narrow your search down and search for all bands, 10 meters, 6 meters. There are some 10 and 6 meter repeaters out there. Band conditions are working. That can be a lot of fun. 2 meters, 1.25, 70, 33 centimeters, 23 centimeters. You got it all. You can also pick based on a system, if you will, like I'm on DMR, I'm on D-Star. Don't have a System Fusion radio yet, though. I would like to get one. We're going to go through D-Star and DMR in future videos and so on. But you could pick from there and get lists of repeaters, all the ones in the state that are DMR. You can pick if there's linked systems. Like for our area, this PCRN system is a big one. Or you can go down and you can actually recommend it for use nearby certain things. Or you can just come down, which is what most people will do, and you pick your locale. So if I wanted, I don't know, if I was in Woodbridge, say, and I wanted all the repeaters for Woodbridge, which this is what we programmed in just a little bit ago, I would go here, click that, and it shows me all the repeaters that are found near Woodbridge. So the Baofeng radio is capable of transmit and receive on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. So you're going to be on the 147, the 444, the 444 here. You're not going to be using this. Also because it's D-Star, so you can't do the digital modes on that radio. And then this one is the 1.25 centimeters. That radio, you could put that in there and listen, but you would not be able to transmit or talk to anybody on that. So we programmed this one. You can see where it's given some basic info. If you click it, it'll tell you the uplink, the downlink. That's what we put, the offset. And you can see right here where it says it's a plus. That would be a minus if not. Where it gives you the CTCSS tones, if there's a downlink tone for listening. And then it tells you where it is, gives you the grid square, the call sign that's assigned for that repeater. It'll tell you here if it's open use or if it's one that happens to be like restricted to something, closed, club only, which those you don't really find much of that. It tells you who the sponsor is, and then it gives you some details about where it's at and what it may be sitting on. So this will tell you some details about it, and if there's a website associated with that repeater or the organization that runs it, it'll give you that here. And then over here on this map, this will show you the footprint. That's the circle. And you'll see propagation reports. If you want to add one, you're welcome to add one. Where people have done it, like you can see here, a base station right here has hit the repeater. This is a rough estimate of where it's located. There are some that don't have this circle, so don't expect every repeater to show you this. And there are some where the exact, right here, this is known. There are some where the exact coordinates are not known. And I have had one I've seen that actually showed the repeater sitting out in the ocean. Not sure what happened there. I guess it got entered wrong. But that's where you get your repeater info. Like I said, when we go through chirp and all of that, we'll reference this again because there's a way to pull this data right here. We can pull that in from here using chirp and pre-populate most all of this information for us so that it's just minor little edits versus hard coding, hand coding everything in. Still not as difficult as a code plug for DMR, which that's coming. We'll get to that eventually. But that's repeater book right there. And then since I mentioned it, we will go for the chirp software. Let's see. And then this is where you get chirp from. Chirp is actually able to work. It works with a lot of radios, as you can see from here. Tons and tons of radio. Most of your Chinese made radios work with this. Your Baofangs that you see here, there's the BTEX. And you can see UV-5X and all this other stuff. But it works with a lot of different radios. It will work with your Yaesus. I have personally used it setting up an old THD72 Kenwood HT. But the software is downloaded from here. The software, it's got a wiki for it. The one thing you have to make sure of is this thing, whenever you open Chirp, it'll tell you that there's an update. Download and do the update when it gives it to you. They do a lot of bug fixing. I've noticed a lot of updates will happen for this. They happen quite often. You can go into here also and look up if you're having issues with cabling. Some people actually like to try and create their own programming cables. I personally don't do that. I just bought the one that works the radio. The Baofangs are the ones that are very particular with that cable. Some of the other radios, like my Kenwoods and so on, those will work with just in my Anytones. Those will work with just generic standard USB cables that have the right kind of connection. There's no special chipsets or anything in there for those. But this is Chirp, where you can get the software. And then, like I said, part 2 of this video, we're going to go through Chirp. We're going to cover all of that stuff and go through how to program the radio. And then we'll do a part 3 where we will do some usage and just show some basics for how you would use it and so on. So for those who don't have their license yet, I highly recommend getting your amateur radio license. I think it's a useful skill to have, and it really opens up a door for a lot of different. There's a lot of contests. There's a lot of there's so many different things people do with ham radio that people may not even realize you can do. All the digital modes. It is possible to send emails. There's messaging through it. You've got anything on HF, worldwide communications. There's lots of contests and such. Even with a technician license, there's a ton of things you can do and access to get you started. These are fantastic when it comes to, I made reference earlier to emergency communications. Radios in general, but amateur radio especially, kind of born from it. Not really born from it, but it's really got roots in emergency communications, off-grid type of communications. If cell phones are down, or your pick your situation, storms, man-made emergencies, natural disasters, whatever. Amateur radio is a way, radios in general, but amateur radio is a way for you to be able to reach out and try and get help, offer help. They do things simulating grid down, simulating emergency situations, doing fox hunts, using directional antennas and searching for weak signals that are lost in the woods or whatever, doing field day, which is portable power, build your antenna on site, and simulating emergency stuff. So lots and lots of things to get into with amateur radio. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it, especially if you're going to have a radio like this. Why not get licensed and be able to use it to its fullest? So that'll cover it for part 1 of the video here, which, like I said, was just basic how-to on the radio, the buttons, an overview, so that it's not quite so scary for people, and help you kind of get your feet wet. Part 2, we'll get into Chirp and programming, and then part 3, we'll actually do a little bit of usage and just mess around with it and show how it functions. So I appreciate everybody for watching. I'll put some links down in the description where you can find some of the stuff that was mentioned in the video here. For now, that will do it. So I will say 7-3 to everybody for watching. I appreciate you watching, and I'll look forward to seeing y'all on the next video.